So yeah, this is the exciting morning when we're going to connect with David Moore, and David feels kind of keenly like he's been away from our congregation too long, because this is a home for him too, so I'm I'm just excited that it's going to work. If hopefully it will work. So we haven't connected yet, but we're planning to. And in the meantime, I think maybe we should just start with our music set. And so grateful for you guys. And I understand you're going to do 3 songs before the prayers and talk, and then with the song afterwards. So thank you. Okay, so maybe I'll just say a prayer. Lord, please help this morning to be full of grace, and I pray that you'd invest yourself in our gathered state here, and that that everything would be honoring to you, and that would be encouraging for all of us. And we just thank you for this opportunity. Amen.
Oh, here he is.
What? What?
Oh.
Where are you?
Where?
Yay! Okay, so all we need is to unmute and put video on.
Yeah.
Hit record, Walter.
It's recording.
Yay! So David, welcome. We're just thrilled to have you here today, and Tina and the gang are going to, I think it's Tina and Rick and Donna are going to do some music, and so we'll begin by worshiping that way. And I'll just lead in a short prayer time, and then David, we'll give it to you to talk. Is Diane there?
She's not up yet.
Will you give her a love?
Yes, absolutely. You're not doing coffee today, huh?
Oh,
We got coffee. Through COVID, we haven't done the same kind of service that we used to do. So we stop.
Yes.
We don't do that. We've integrated it. So we take the things that we're trying to do and put them all together into this time. For a long time, we did.
Just think that a couple of generations from now, churches will not have coffee because we're into traditions.
Yeah, man, that's right. We'll make a tradition out of this one. So I thought I'd do a reading from Padre Gotuma from the Corrymeela community in Ireland, and we've been reading some of these some days, and I've read this one once before. I love it. It's called A Prayer of Shelter and Shadow. I won't read the Gaelic part at the beginning. Wasn't the music beautiful?
Yeah.
Oh, you know what? Didn't it seem to you that was an interesting, I don't know if you were thinking of it this way, but it just seemed like such an interesting theme. Because we started with Let It Be, which is like bring your soul to rest. Especially, for Paul McCartney, when he wrote it, it was about feeling so nervous, and in the night his mom comes to him in a vision. His mom had died early, and she says, "Let it be." And so it's like the first one is like thinking about all the negative thoughts and all the worries and everything else, and it's just come to let it be at a place of rest. The next one is break new ground, like pick yourself up and do something, but you don't want to do that out of an unrested state. You don't want to do that out of your frantic state. You want to do it you want to get to let it be, and then you can move forward and break new ground. And then the third one was, and you don't want to do it by yourself. You want to do it in participation with the Lord. You want to learn how to let God's strength fill everything you do. You want to flow with God. Brilliant. Way to go. Is that exactly how you guys thought? I thought so. So we've so appreciated Padre Otuma's influence in our community since the Poetry Festival a couple of years ago. And this one is a prayer of shelter and shadow. It's in the shelter of each other that the people live. It's in the shadow of each other that the people live. We know that sometimes we are alone, and sometimes we are in community. Sometimes we are in shadow, and sometimes we are surrounded by shelter. Sometimes we feel like exiles in our land, in our languages, and in our bodies. And sometimes we feel surrounded by welcome. As we seek to be human together, may we share the things that do not fade: generosity, truth-telling, silence, respect, and love. And may the power we share be for the good of all. We honor God, the source of this rich life, and we honor each other, storyful and lovely. Whether in our shadow or in our shelter, may we live well and fully with each other. Amen. Now, as we pray today, Pete just told me about a wonderful lady from the Anglican community, and her name was Darlene. Darlene Hasty, who passed away this week. And Pete says that she has been a serious representative of prayer chains in town, and many times she's phoned Pete and she's asked if she could pray for him. And she's just been a wonderful and caring person who encouraged people to know God and love God better.
Yeah, right, yeah.
Yeah. So we'll pray for her and her family. Are there other people that we should be remembering, or other situations? Yeah.
I'd like us to pray for Brian and Anderson, who working from cancer.
So Alex's mom and dad, Brian and Lee Henderson, that live sometimes here in St. Stephen and sometimes in Ontario, and they're both now in the middle of cancer journey. Yeah. So let's hold them up for sure. Yeah, and we've visited the last 2 weeks. We've visited with a couple of people that are starting really battling late stage cancers. Yeah, it's a hard part of life. Okay, let's just go into a bit of silence and hold up these concerns, and then we can finish with the Lord's Prayer. And then David, I'll give it to you to start speaking. Lord, hear our prayers. Hear our prayers for Darlene and her family. Hear our prayers for Brian and Lee. Hear our prayers for all of our dear friends who are wrestling with illness or circumstances. Hear our prayers for a just and peaceful world. Hear our prayers for just and equitable societies. Jesus, hear our prayers for our poor planet. Thank you for the resolution this week that the countries finally came to. We pray for more and more wisdom in the governance and stewardship of the earth. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, power, and glory, forever and ever. Amen. Okay, well, so David, over to you. It's wonderful for us to get this chance to connect. Sorry to make you get up so early. Of course, you know, we started this just after 10:30, and that would be just after 6:30 for David in the morning. Okay.
Well, before I get started, if someone would share screen or make me co-host or something. I hear an echo. I think maybe I'm getting, yeah. Yeah, I was thinking it's probably the mic.
Oh, the little guy is muted.
Can you mute the first one?
What happens if you mute your own speaker?
Oh yeah, let's see. How's that? Can you hear me?
For us, yeah.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Perfect here.
I can also mute our room if you don't need any feedback from us.
Well, no, I'd rather do it on this end.
Okay.
Let's see. Matt, so how do I just mute on my external? Oh, you know what? I could just take the headset off. Everybody's good? All right. So I need to listen a little bit though. Well, it's so good to see everyone and to be seen. And I needed to hear Let It Be today. And if someone would go to the trouble to send me links of the other two songs, not right now, but you know, I see Lindsay moved it, and so I thought she was. Is that Lindsay?
It's Renata.
Oh yeah, Laura. Is your mom there?
Nope, not today.
Okay. I just saw the glasses. This place, St. Croix Church, along with St. Stephen's University, and the home of Peter and Mary Ellen, where I have stayed multiple times, are like, you know, in ancient times, people built altars of commemoration. And I feel like you all are an important altar for me, not just because of multiple visits, but just short of a decade ago, I spent 3 months there, spent basically the winter. It was very transformative. And I look forward to the day when I can physically be there with you. Right now, it's really nice during the day here. Yesterday was 30 degrees. Yeah, but the thing is that this is mid-November. It's not supposed to be this hot. That's summer weather, but things are changing. I'm going to read a passage that describes our life. Make sure I can. Okay. Yeah, I'm going to share a passage. Oh, you know, when I was a kid, preachers would come into town and they'd joke. At that time, it was Elizabeth Taylor or some other celebrity. They said, I won't keep you long. I'll be like Elizabeth Taylor. because she had 8 husbands. Just so maybe Larry King. I don't know, but I won't keep you long. So I'm going to read a passage that describes our life experience as a race. You don't win this race by defeating someone else. We are in it to help each other win it. And we'll see in a moment that our only opponent is our shadow, your lower self, where your ego stands between you and the love and support of community. Your opponent is not other humans, not even those with whom you don't see eye to eye. This reading presents the race as a relay. You've been handed a baton, and you've seen relay races, usually sprints, but our race is long and we need endurance. When a runner passes the baton, they remain as focused as the person they hand it off to. They're invested. It's as though they are still running, and they cheer their teammate on and the teammate after that, because they're all in the same competition together. For the race you are running right now, though you might not always get it, you need it. That is, to be cheered on. If you see your life's work in isolation from the runners that came before you, it's going to overwhelm you. So I'm going to ask you to just take a moment and visualize. If you just go ahead and close your eyes and visualize what is, and to us actually, an invisible amphitheater, but this amphitheater full of people who want you to win, who need you to win. Okay. So I want to talk from this theme. We have already won. Back in the day, TV networks made VHS recordings available. I only ever purchased one. This past Tuesday marked 32 years since that night I was captivated by ABC News Nightline, November 9th, 1989. The coverage of East Germans flooding through Vandenberg Gate. It astonished the world. This breakthrough came out of nowhere, except it didn't. The revolution was not sudden. People had been secretly organizing for nearly 3 decades. In the meantime, those who tried to escape were arrested or shot. In 1982, some years before the fall of the Berlin Wall, Pastor Christian Führer in the city of Leipzig hosted a prayer meeting on Mondays. And the weekly meetings were a peaceful resistance, and the numbers kept growing. The Monday before the fall of the Berlin Wall, 70,000 East Germans met outside the church and marched through the streets, showing us all that peaceful revolution is possible. And this pastor just died not that long ago. Lived into the 21st century. Peaceful revolution is possible, but revolutions can also be tragically bloody. Peaceful movements cast a spotlight on the state. Peaceful movements are a response to state-sponsored and state-excused violence. Think of Emmett Till, Stephen Biko, Trayvon Martin, or George Floyd. When a righteous person like you gets cut down, it's not a defeat. You ran your leg. The race goes on. Over a decade before the Soviets constructed the Berlin Wall, South Africa built a different wall. They segregated all indigenous Africans and people of color from white citizens. I was a young pastor in the 1980s, and Nelson Mandela was in prison. His people were dehumanized. There was no World Wide Web, but somehow I stumbled upon a faith-based activism organization called African Enterprise. I found out about Stephen Lungu, who died this past January of COVID-19. And Stephen, well, African Enterprise's website remembers Stephen this way. Steve hated God for what had happened to him, and he hated white people who had everything while blacks starved. Age 18, when the Rhodesia Zimbabwe liberation struggle began, he was ready to use his gang to fight for freedom. Little did Stephen know that in the midst of this time of national revolution, there would come an inner revolution in his life. In his well-known testimony, Stephen recounts an evening where, in his late teens, he took his gang to throw petrol bombs into an evangelistic tent meeting in the capital city of Harare. As they awaited the appointed time to do this, the words of the preacher penetrated Stephen's heart, and he ended up staggering forward to give his life to Christ instead. In the 1990s, after apartheid ended, African Enterprise sent Stephen Lungu to tell his story worldwide. His was the most compelling presentation I remember of all the guest speakers that I have invited over the decades. He came to our church and he spoke for 3 hours and nobody moved. We were frozen in our seats as he told his story, and amazingly, his traveling companion was a former South African policeman who once tried to kill Stephen. I continued to stay in touch with the work of African Enterprise, and I have no doubt that apartheid was overturned by faith. What kind of faith? Well, here's what Desmond Tutu used to say, because he's now officially retired. He said, "We used to tell our people at home it's going to be okay. The victory has already been won. But in the process of our apprehending this victory, appropriating it, there are going to be casualties. More of our people are going to be detained. More are going to be imprisoned. More are going to be killed. But my people," we used to say, "we have already won." Or as Desmond Tutu would say it, "We have already won." We have already won. They have lost. Those who support injustice have lost. And so 11 years later, after 11 years after apartheid ended, I visited South Africa for the first time, first of many visits. I had a book project where I'd raise money here in the States and then purchase books for kids in the townships and schools in the townships. At last, a couple who hosted me, one of the couples, and actually he's an Anglican priest. This couple, Mluleki and Lulama and Koloti, they visited us here in Santa Barbara. And I remember the time they were sitting across from me and we were going over their country's recent history. And I was still, even 11 years had passed, I was still just taken. Still fascinated with the fall of apartheid. And I remember saying to Mluleki and Lulama, "Wow, it seemed to happen so suddenly." And I remember him saying, Suddenly for you, my brother. So now back to this race we are running. Our race is our revolution, and this passage in Hebrews 12 shows that the revolutionary work of Jesus met with violent resistance. So let's look at the passage. Do you see what this means? This race we're running. All these pioneers who blazed the way, all these veterans cheering us on, it means we'd better get on with it, strip down, start running, and never quit. No extra spiritual fat. No parasitic sins. Okay, so these parasitic sins are atmospheric, even suffocating, like ultra high humidity. These sins are the selfishness and the quest for domination that we see in the powers that need to be taken down and remade. Sins that we want to make sure don't infect our souls, because these sins violate humanity. But don't let them into your soul. Don't internalize what you see. Don't give in to what you see. Stay in the race. It says here, keep your eyes on Jesus, because he never lost sight of where he was headed. That exhilarating finish in and with God. He could put up with anything along the way, cross, shame, whatever. And now he's there in the place of honor, right alongside God. When you find yourselves flagging in your faith, go over that story again, item by item, that long litany of hostility he plowed through. That will shoot adrenaline into your souls. In this all-out match against sin, others have suffered far worse than you, to say nothing of what Jesus went through, all that bloodshed. So don't feel sorry for yourselves, or have you forgotten how good parents treat children and that God regards you as his children. His children. This is what God is doing to help us, and it's as though the universe is conspiring to shape you and prepare you, to get you in shape. My dear child, don't shrug off God's discipline. Don't be crushed by it either. It's the child he loves that he disciplines. The child he embraces, he also corrects. God is educating you. Yeah. We respect our parents, but God is doing what is best for us, not what's like our parents seemed best. And then this part says it always feels like it's going against the grain. Later, of course, it pays off big time. For it's the well-trained who find themselves mature in their relationship with God. So don't sit around on your hands. No more dragging your feet. Clear the path for long-distance runners so no one will trip and fall, so no one will step in a hole and sprain an ankle. Help each other out and run for it. Help each other out and run for it. And I'm going to finish this reading with 3 more verses that reminds me of ancient Greek Olympic Games. But we are reading a letter to Hebrews, so Mount Olympus was not part of their ancient memory. Jerusalem was. And so it says, you have come to Mount Zion, this city where God resides. The invisible Jerusalem is populated by throngs of festive angels and God's citizens. It's the city where God is judged with judgments that make us just. You've come to Jesus, who presents us with a new covenant, a fresh charter from God. He is the mediator of this covenant. He is the mediator of this covenant. So, if this is a distance race, they must have been running uphill for a long time. And that's the character of revelation. It's always uphill until you're there. The reference is to a mountain they couldn't see, an invisible Jerusalem. So what unseen mountain are you running? Remember, we're in it to win it for each other. Your people have survived so much, your family, your chosen family. Your chosen family gets exhausted, though. Sometimes they hurt. This is why we must focus on what we know. You have more questions than answers, but you know what's in your heart. We read Hebrews 12. The chapter that precedes it contains a list of these Hebrews' ancestors, their predecessors, what they overcame. Ancestors ran this race before they did. That chapter mentions names like Abraham, Sarah, Isaac, Jacob, Moses, Rahab, once a sex worker, Samson, once a strong man, David, once a king and a murderer. All kinds of ancestors. That chapter reads, these people overthrew kingdoms, ruled with justice, received what God had promised them. They shut the mouths of lions, quenched the flames of fire, and escaped death by the edge of the sword. Their weakness was turned to strength. They became strong in battle and put whole armies to flight. Women received their loved ones back again from death, but others were tortured, refusing to turn from God in order to be set free. They placed their hope in a better life after the resurrection. Some were jeered at, and their backs were cut open with whips. Others were chained in prisons. Some died by stoning. Some were sawed in half. Others were killed with the sword. Some went about wearing skins of sheep and goats, destitute and oppressed and mistreated. They were too good for this world, wandering over deserts and mountains, hiding in caves and holes in the ground. All these people earned a good reputation because of their faith. Yet none of them received all that God had promised, for God had promised something better in mind for us. God had something better in mind for us so that they would not reach perfection without us. So those were their predecessors. We have even more predecessors. And, if you can't think of an ancestor who fills this role, you can adopt more predecessors. And even if you do have heroes in your lineage, there is such a rich array of predecessors. For me, one of those predecessors is that 90-year-old 5'4" giant who lives with his partner Nomalitzo in the outskirts of Cape Town, Archbishop Emeritus Desmond Tutu. The reason Desmond Tutu could say, we have already won, decades before they conquered apartheid, is because he knew something. Faith is more than believing. Faith is knowing. And when you know, you can believe. Well, Desmond Tutu is officially retired, but he has run a glorious race and passed the baton, this baton of unwavering faith. Today, Desmond Tutu's baton infuses confidence in people around the world, telling us that we have already won. Faith is knowing, not guessing, not wishing and hoping. It's knowing. Faith sees more clearly than your physical eyes. Your faith is your high-powered telescope. You see beyond the mountainous terrain of impossibility. You penetrate the granite hillside of despair and obstacles of all sorts. Faith sees in the dark. Faith is the deep conviction that we share that goodness ought to prevail, not in a few select locations, but everywhere. We call for justice to run down like water and righteousness like a mighty stream. When you tell people that you walk by faith, not by sight, it means you know something. Your faith is the assurance. Your faith is the evidence. But here's the thing, everybody. We have to remember what we know. And we need to remind one another. May we focus on what we see, because there will be plenty enough people, including people you love dearly, who don't know what you know and don't see what you see. You might hear some hecklers too, sometimes in your own head. You have to ignore the naysayers. People are not our rivals, so don't let them trigger you. Instead, notice your supporters, the folks who share Gatorade while you're running this race, the people who splash you with cool water to sustain you in the scorching heat. Notice the folks who are cheering you on, whom you may or may not see with your physical eyes. And remember, we run for our fans. And we run for those who run alongside us. And we run for those who come after us. And we run for those who came before us. I was a distance runner when I was young. What I remember is that every single race had at least one moment where I came close to quitting. I would ask myself, why are you punishing yourself like this? When I was racing through a wooded area, I would imagine running into the trees and hiding, thinking nobody has to know that I gave up. As I run with you, my dear friends, I remind you to not let anything or anyone break your stride or your spirit. I want to pray. Holy God, we thank you for those who went before us, the ones who advanced the course of history, and we pray for them. Few of them were famous. Sometimes the harder you try to be recognized, the more you become irrelevant. But we're in this race. This race is about how much heart we have. It's about the depth of our convictions. It's about righteousness. And for all these folks who are gathered right now, I bring before you anyone who is dealing with race fatigue. May we be found encouraging the other runners, whether it's with the power of a compliment or an expression of gratitude, or even giving someone a gift, because we're going to need some encouragement too. We thank you that we have endured this far. We've come this far by faith. Amen. All right. Let's talk. Do you have to go up to the microphone to speak?
Let's try some. Can you hear me if I speak like this?
I hear you.
Okay. It's definitely been too long since you've been here.
Yeah. It's the longest I've been away since I've known you.
Yeah, we miss you.
Good to know that you didn't run away into those trees, did
You know, they still appear in my imagination sometimes. Anybody have any responses, any questions, any critique?
I thought your third point, no. You know what I want to say really is, I don't understand exactly what happened while you were speaking, but I think that it's a little bit like giving somebody water while they're in a race. I just felt more alive again. Thank you.
I was just saying that the idea of running a race has been a very consistent theme in my upbringing and in my whatever. But I feel like much of my ancestors were persecuted for things they should not have been doing. Like, for example, the example I used was being homophobic or whatever. And so I just have a really hard time with I feel like the Black legacy is a very clear race to begin. It's really awful what's happened, and it's a very clear, it's not finished yet situation, you know? And, you know, we stand with you in every way we know how, which isn't always very good, I have to say. But anyway, just to say that I feel like sometimes, I don't know what race we're in. All that certitude that I started with has been, I think, overturned in the last number of years. But then it kind of leaves the person in a bit of a limbo of, well, okay, well, what race are we in then? You know, do you understand what I'm saying?
I think so. In fact, that's a question that's been on my mind this week. That it's really imperative for us to adopt ancestors in some cases and become allies with their physical descendants. I've noticed, and this is just from where I sit, that it's people who have endured great suffering who take more pride in their ancestors, but not just pride. There's an adoration, you know. In some places it would be ancestor worship, I guess, but you know, here in the Southwest of the U.S., we are greatly influenced by Mexican culture and Dia de los Muertos, which is, it's a holiday that the Spaniards, the Catholics, tried to eliminate, tried to stop this holiday, but they couldn't. So they made it, they tried to shape it around All Saints Day. But these are indigenous people who do everything they can to keep their ancestors in mind. And I think it influences their families today because their families are known for being more intimate, closer, more solidarity than other people in our country. But it's people who are First Nations, Native American, indigenous people have a recognition of ancestors. People who live close to the earth have that. It's not always the case that it's people who have been persecuted, because Japan, I mean, their society is highly cognizant of their ancestors, but they're not always the persecuted ones. In recent history, they've been the persecutors, the 20th century, more than being persecuted. But, you know, generally speaking, in the West, it seems like the people who have dealt with great hardship have a stronger reason to recognize the resilience of their ancestors. You know, I that's open for critique too, because it's just something that's been moving through my head this week, and I don't look at it as a conclusion, as some kind of conclusion. Speculation. That.
What's the translation of the holiday?
Oh, Dia de los Muertos. It means Day of the Dead.
And what was it like?
What's that?
How was it celebrated?
Okay, they go to the graves of people in their family, and they leave candles and flowers and gifts. Like if their great grandfather really loved eating corn, they might leave some corn or something that remembers them. And it's a big deal. I mean, we had several Dia de los Muertos celebrations right here in Santa Barbara. The idea is that as long as you can remember your ancestors, they are still alive. And so we try to do everything we can to remember them. I recommend a Disney movie called Coco. Anybody ever see Coco?
Yeah, fantastic. I was going to say, it's your turn. I was going to say the same thing. You got to watch Coco because it's really, really good, and it
and their respect for their ancestors. And
Yeah.
in the evangelical church community, we've seen it as evil. A little bit like how North American evangelicals have sometimes used Halloween. But it's a much deeper thing, I think. It's Mexican culture than even Halloween is. Anyway, it's a fascinating movie. Yeah, come over and watch it. I love it. Anybody can come over and watch it.
Please do. You know, it's so prevalent here that we shape our Sundays, our Sunday worship together around Dia de los Muertos, which was a couple of weeks ago.
Oh. Gonna be.
Can you hear me if I'm here talking to David?
I think it'd be better if you came. Yeah.
Yeah, you go a little bit that way, you can be on camera.
Hi, it's Jess. We have
Hey.
I love you very much. I really loved what you said about running for your fans and not for the naysayers. And I guess I'm just wondering, I don't think I've really heard that much before. And sometimes I feel like the motivation, especially related to what Wilma was saying, sometimes my motivation has come from the negative messages I received within the church, and I'm trying to run a different way. Anyway, it's a hard thing. Like when you had us visualize the people from our past, our ancestors, I thought about a lot of those like church origins that I came from. That gave me the thing I love most, but also in a lot of ways, some of the things I'm receiving. Anyway, I think I have a question, which is, do you have any tips or strategies on, focusing more on running for the fans? And I guess also I thought sometimes the fans are fewer. Like, you have fewer fans. You have naysayers. So
Yeah.
I need to say a little more about that.
Yeah, it's interesting. You know, most of us don't have a whole lot of fans, but some of us do, like Desmond Tutu. And so what we do is we are inspired by the fact that people we relate to have lots of fans. We're happy that they're, for their example and their visibility, and it gives us hope when we see that people appreciate them genuinely. It's part of the relay race, because when we see them encouraged, then we are encouraged alongside them, because we're all in the same race. So it's really good to find people who have huge networks, and just let them reside in your consciousness. It's kind of like in sports, right? Not that long ago that Kobe Bryant died in a helicopter crash. And of course, here in Southern California, there are a lot of Laker fans and a lot of Kobe fans. And when he was killed, it wasn't just that he was a great basketball player. I think that we were struck by his humanity, his relatability. And I think that the fact that he had won a Grammy, and that production, I don't know if you've ever seen Kobe's production, not a Grammy, what's the one?
Oscar?
Oscar. Thanks, Matt. He won an Oscar. So in the same way as people adoring and being inspired by sports stars, I think that we need to, we would do well to continue to look to the people who have our values, who we recognize as fellow runners, and bring them into our, and I think we do this already, but it's good to name it, to I want to identify it right now. And I want to bless the people who you admire, who perhaps have paid a greater price to be who they are, and yet they still have a smile. That's the key right there, is you still have joy. You still have a smile. And you see people like that, you know that they've paid a price, but they still have joy, then you look up to them, and because you're in the same relay.
Hey, David. My pondering, I guess, is whether or not, even if we're racing with people at the same time, whether or not we're all going towards the same destination or not. I guess as someone who's in finished my BA and have all these different people that I'm inspired by, but I'm not really sure which direction I'm supposed to be running in. There's just sort of well, where am I going? Does it matter? Do the fans care? Are the people that I'm running with going the same way? Just where exactly I'm running, to what degree does it matter, I guess?
I can say as a former distance runner that not just in races, but even in practice, you run, you get out 5-10 miles. We ran sometimes out away from town. And sometimes you wonder, am I lost? Am I going to be able to find my way back? And I hope somebody else who's running, I can find somebody like that. I can see, pretty soon, so I can it'll affirm the fact that I'm doing that. And I think that may hold also for this race of life that we're running. Sometimes it might feel like you're running in the wrong direction, but I think if you really dig deep, this is where we need to be still and know that God is God. Because you dig deep, because all of the hecklers are out there too, all the other voices and the experts, so to speak, self-proclaimed experts. All of that is out there. And you just want to keep running and, take it for what it's worth when you can find a fellow runner.
So I've been having a thought too. It's based on all of these things that people are saying to you and that you're saying. And for me, I love Wilma's and Jess's sense that, something wonderful was given by early training, but also some very bad ideas were there. And so we're recognizing that more and more, that even the place that we thought was full of our best ancestors or full of our good witnesses to truth got off track sometimes and really was the oppressive force in society or the status quo upholder that kept bad society, bad injustice strong. So recognizing this now, I've been thinking, the last person you told me about that I fell in love with was Valerie Carr, the Sikh activist. who's been in played a big part in the Women's March. And I watched her in a 1-hour interview with Parker Palmer, whom I've loved for a long time, and he's a mentor to her. And I thought, when I am watching them and I'm listening to them talk, there's something that comes alive inside of me that almost reverberates with joy. It's when I listen to you too. I just reverberate with joy because something inside of me, it's almost like music. It's almost like a harmony is going on, and it's saying, this is the direction, you know. So for me now, it doesn't have to do with somebody saying that they believe the right thing religiously or politically. It's whether they are speaking in such a way that whatever Geiger counter I have in my heart goes off and starts to go, that's the direction, follow that.
Yeah, and it seems like everybody who has spoken reflects this in some way of imperfect predecessors, but they gave us something, and that's exactly what this chapter refers to. It says, "My dear child, don't shrug off God's discipline," and it says, "Have you forgotten how good parents treat children, to the best of their ability, what seemed best to them? But God is doing what is best for us." And it takes into account that we have flawed predecessors. We can still be encouraged by them. Because they are in the race. I mean, yeah.
Maybe that's why we're running the race, to do better. We know what we have to do, and we have to be encouraged to be yourself and not be afraid to be yourself. Your biggest fans want you to be yourself. And we all have things to bring, but we can't bring them if we're not in the race. We can't bring them if we're not fighting demons. We gotta do it. We have strengths that our ancestors have given us. They brought us here, the relay race. And we have things that we say, you know what, that was not right. Okay, get rid of that. And keep going. We all know what the truth is. We all want to love each other. We all want to be happy. So if you know it's wrong, it's wrong. If you just know it's right, you keep going.
Yeah.
Really.
We all know that each generation wants to be if they're going to be parents, they want to be great parents, loving parents. They want to often be better parents than their own parents. And there's no way you're not going to make mistakes. I mean, you might do better, but you're going to have your own issues to deal with because of the uniqueness of all of our personalities and the fact that all of us, have defects, with blind spots, if you will. And, so that's not just true for family. It's true for all of our predecessors. There are things that we have to look past and just look at the fact that they kept running. And they inspired us even though they flopped sometimes.
Get out! Come on!
And the fans are going to get up, Tanya says. Maybe we should have our last piece of music. David, this is just too wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Love you, David.
Love you. Have a beautiful Sunday.